In his inaugural speech, Dr. Rui Gomez stated their main objectives, which are three, one is to ensure the greatest possible consensus of society around the main investment areas, define clear investment priorities, and ensure that our few resources are well used to normalize our economy. The Commission has 60 days to present their findings and recommendations. With COVID-19, Timor-Leste has a window of opportunity, so they say. Every cloud has a silver lining. So it is time to focus inside our country, what we can produce, what can we offer in terms of tourism within and to the outside world. I would leave these to the experts. The key role of the embassy is to promote Timor-Leste as an attractive place for people to visit and invest, and continue to forge relationship with the Australian government and its people. Of course, there are the major components of the bilateral relationship, which Australia is an important partner: development, defense, and security. Australia is working on partnerships for recovery. Australia's COVID-19 development response, focusing on health, security, stability, and economic recovery. Australia is looking for Timor-Leste's input. The embassy has embarked on a strategic plan setting out 5 priorities. They are, number 1, the labor mobility programs, which encompasses seasonal workers program and PLS. The seasonal worker program is a program that began in 2012 and Pacific Labor Scheme in 2018. There are approximately 1,300 seasonal workers in Australia currently. This places Timor-Leste with the 3rd highest number of workers, with Tonga 2nd and Vanuatu 1st. We will continue to foster and grow labor mobility programs. It will be a priority over the next 3 years. Both the seasonal worker program and Pacific Labor Scheme offer many mutual benefits for both Australia and Timor-Leste. According to DFAT, supported survey of returned Timorese seasonal workers remitted over US 14.1 million from Australia back to Timor-Leste over the period in 2019. The money workers earn is invested back into local communities, going towards building houses, education, and starting businesses. The skills gain, acknowledge, transfer opportunities are significant. With COVID-19, Timorese workers feel critical worker shortages in Australia, and the importance of seasonal workers to the agricultural industry could not have been more obvious during COVID-19. The Australian government ensured workers could remain in Australia to help see the country through the crisis through a bridging visa leading up to 12 months. This was a very welcome announcement, as it eased pressure on the Timorese government, who would have to arrange quarantine facilities for hundreds of returning workers. However, it has been a difficult few months for our workers here. Some have coped better than others. There have been instances of workers no longer being needed, causing them to redeploy to other states. This has been a challenging exercise for employers due to interstate travel restrictions and quarantine requirements. On the other hand, many of our workers have enjoyed the opportunity to remain in Australia through this period, continuing to work hard and then earn good money. Despite these obvious benefits, there are many areas for improvement in how these programs are implemented on both sides and the Australian side. There are many opportunities that are yet to be explored when it comes to improving and growing the labor mobility programs that I believe Timor-Leste should look into it. This includes expanding the scope to have an intake of workers in hospitality, accommodation, restaurants, cafes, aged care, and disability care, developing business plans. In particular, with hospitality, I speak from experience with my travel with the veterans around the country over the years. We lack basic skills in the hospitality sector in Dili, let alone in remote areas. It is a challenge for the Timorese government to ensure the skills gained by the workers are being properly channeled once they return home. Another key area of importance is fisheries. The fisheries industry in Timor-Leste is largely underdeveloped and has significant potential. The Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries has set a target to raise domestic fish consumption from 6 kilos per year to 10 kilos per year, which will be achieved through expanding the marine fisheries industry. The embassy is aware that there are 3 Australian companies ready to invest in fisheries, bringing with them the necessary infrastructure and resources that are currently lacking, even though fisheries does not require a great deal of infrastructure. Development of the fisheries industry would promote sustainable resource management, benefiting local economies and contributing to food security. Unfortunately, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing remains a significant transboundary threat, particularly to Timor-Leste, where the impact has been estimated at millions and even billions of dollars. We have more than 700 kilometers of shoreline and a 72,000 kilometers squares exclusive economic zone, which give access to valuable maritime resources. Currently, illegal fishermen are reaping the benefits. According to Major General from FFDTL, Lere detected 200 illegal boats coming into our territory. That was reported only 2 weeks ago. In the short term, we have fostered great partnership with Australian organizations such as Sea Shepherd, who has continued to support and protect the sovereignty of Timor-Leste by patrolling and monitoring its territorial sea. The friendship groups, I think it's one of the important group as well. Australia, as you know, Australian Timor-Leste share a strong history that resonated with both Australian and Timorese people during Timorese people since World War II. Our friendship groups as such are an important part of Timor-Leste's relationship with Australia. The people-to-people links are what makes the relationship so strong. We are witnessing the great work the Friends of Soibada, Friends of Suaif Covalima, Mornington Police and Friends of Los Palos, Trekking for Timor in Blue Mountains, and many more are undertaken in Timor-Leste to assist in development in the areas of health, education, sanitation, which makes such a difference to these people's lives. Especially now, as we face this health crisis, our development partners have been so critical to our response. The embassy envisages a closer working relationship with our friendship groups. We have great examples like the Friends of Suai, who have been very active over the past 20 years. Another example is Mornington Police Peninsula, Friends of Los Palos. They have raised over $200,000 for the local communities. Now Mornington Peninsula has funds, the council I hear that has funds of $300,000 for carbon credit for Los Palos. Partners such as Andrew Ma, who has worked closely with Friends of Suai Covalima and in Baguia, have implemented carbon offset schemes and reforestation programs, such as with One Seed in Baguia. There are around 1,000 trees in Baguia, and farmers are being compensated for looking after the trees. These programs help build local economies, generate income, and repair the environment for future use. One Seed and Expand with Oxfam have signed an MOU with the European Union to look for 5 areas in Timor-Leste replicating Baguia's success. It is planned to start in November this year if all goes well. Tourism with historical component. Timor-Leste, as you know, is in a unique position, given we have had a relatively low number of cases and no deaths from COVID-19. However, it is important not to be complacent and continue implementing strict measures. Our track record so far makes us very attractive option for post-COVID-19 travel, especially for Australian holiday makers. Tourism and underdeveloped industry that has immense untapped potential, especially in the areas of eco and marine tourism, agritourism, and historical and cultural tourism. Our rich history should be front and entire center in our tourism strategy. The rugged mountains landscape, imperfect historical trekking opportunities where participants can walk in the footsteps of guerrilla fighters. Both veterans of Timor-Leste, together with Australian veterans, have established a walking track in Loihunu, Labalo in Osu. The place has a history of World War II and Timorese resistance hideouts. It was inaugurated by His Excellency President of the Republic, Francisco Guterres in 2018. There are parks that have been named after our resistance heroes. For example, in 2006 in Lauten, Ninukone Santana, and in 2015, Kairala Shanana Guzmão National Park in Ainaru. These parks need to be developed in a way that our history can be traced back to those difficult but enduring times. The veterans could play a role as they are the experts in the field. This would be an opportunity to create jobs for local communities and veterans. It will also enable the veterans to recount their stories, their endurance during difficult times, and preserving our history for generations. Centro Nacional Chega, da Memória e Esperança, an institution established in 2017 to implement the recommendations of CAVR, which is to preserve our history and to never repeat it again. Chega has produced a map on historical sites in Dili. This could be factored into tourism packages. We should organize tour packages for Australian holiday makers. For example, Dili Atauru, Dili Ramelau, Dili Bagia, Dili Balibo. These are the initial stages that I think could be looked into. Field production location. Last year, prior to the 20th anniversary of the 30th of August referendum, the film production company Matchbox used Dili as a location to film the TV drama series Stateless. It spent about $200,000 in 7 days in Dili alone. We should also look into these opportunities to promote Timor-Leste as a location for film productions. Veterans to veterans affairs. Strengthening relations between veterans of Timor-Leste and Australia is another important area for the embassy. We will work with Veterans Care Association in Queensland and the RSL to promote Timor Awakening Program. Timor Awakening Program was developed by Gary and Michael Stone in response to the increasing suicide crisis, as well as diminishing mental and physical health amongst the Australian veteran community. Timor Awakening embodies the relationship between the Australian soldier and the people of East Timor forged in World War II, promoting honorable values, shared identity, and unique purpose. Furthermore, our 24 years of war and resilience, courage and discipline and forgiveness has shined a light on Australian veterans. It helped them in their road to the recovery. To date, approximately 300 Australian veterans and partners have participated. It has been highly effective and successful. A major part of the success is due to the program being conducted in Timor-Leste, engaging Timorese veterans and local population. This has brought economic benefits to the local communities. There are other priorities that the embassy has. This is engaging the Timorese community here in Australia. I would like to see greater involvement of the Timorese community in Australia. The diaspora community played an important role during our difficult times, and their role is just as important now. That is promoting our culture. They should be more visible. There are so many multicultural festivals, musical festivals in various states funded by local and state governments. They should take advantage of it. There is also an emerging generation of Timorese diaspora eager to find out about their roots. Once Timor-Leste is open, this generation can travel and visit their families, bringing economic benefits to Timor-Leste. Now, challenges and a bit of a homework. I think having said all this, I'm mindful of the challenges ahead to boost tourism in Timor-Leste. For start, we have expensive airfares plus entry visas, connectivity, overpriced local products, expensive hotels, taxi drivers charging international passengers, overpricing. The other homework is Dili remains one of the dirtiest cities It's really an eyesore to the international visitors and locals. We also should have accessible, clean toilets. To conclude, I have outlined some of the opportunities and challenges ahead. Overall, COVID-19, we can use this time to improve our service delivery capabilities in various sectors that are important, such as fisheries, hospitality, accommodation, better health services, and better infrastructure. I look forward to hear from other speakers on their perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, especially for outlining the many areas such as fishing and tourism, spelling out both the advantages and the problems that you have as far as getting tourism off the ground, and especially now, as you said, we can spend this time when we're in lockup looking for better and quicker ways for us to work together as soon as the fence comes down. And I hope that we'll be able to continue to encourage the Australian government as well as the friendship groups in helping to advance Australia's relationship with Timor and making sure that we keep our eye on what's happening so that we can continue to push the government to assist. And I certainly think that the Australian ambassador to Timor has been so far very helpful, and that makes it easier for us to work with the Australian government. So thank you very much, Ines, and I'll now invite the other speakers. So Guteriano Neves, who studied at ANU, he graduated through the Crawford School of Public Policy with a master's degree, and he worked in the College of Arts and Social Science. He now works as independent policy analyst in Dili. So we'd like to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon from Dili. I'm delighted and thrilled and to be here, and this is first time deliver talk through the Zoom, so it's kind of nervous in a little bit. I would like to take on from the Her Excellency Ambassador final remarks that this is a good opportunity for us to deliver better services for the government to build the tourism sector, and this is what actually the Prime Minister has been publicly acknowledged, that COVID is not only a problem, a public health issue, but for Timor-Leste, it's also an opportunity for the country to reflect upon the path, the choices that the country has been taken over the last 20 years. So just to update a little bit about the current situation in Timor-Leste, at least from the socio-economic side, the COVID has there are, I think, there are four main channels of which the COVID has affected the country. One is the fact that the price of the petroleum has been declining significantly, to the lowest level since 2008. So it obviously affects the country's GDP, overall GDP, and also the government's revenue from the petroleum sector. Another one is because the financial market situation that has been volatile, that also affects the performance of the petroleum fund. Recently, I mean, last month, the central bank announced that it has lost around 800 millions from the petroleum fund, but I think now they are recovered some of them. Another sector that the country has affected is the tourism sector, where we don't have now any visitors for the country. So some of the hotels, restaurants, basically they lost almost 80 to 100% of their income. So they cannot, at least now they cannot keep open because they don't have income right now. And also the remittance from Australia, UK, and the South Korea, because it is, although it doesn't come into the state budget, state finances, but the importance of the remittance is that it goes directly to the consumption of the household. And the other channel of it, the COVID effect is that because the country highly depend on the imported goods and services from overseas, so when the countries like Indonesia, China imposes the lockdown for their citizens, then it affects the supply chain in the country. And this has resulted in some of the business, because they depend on the input from the overseas, including some of the skilled labor from overseas. This has affected their business activities. And I think I have got some notifications and some reports about this situation. For example, coffee industry, they have, because they depend on the skilled labor from the overseas, so it has affected. Now, the government, as we know, in the previous, last 3 months, the government approved the economic recovery, what they call package, which is around 140 million, with basically the package consists of various aspects of that. And the biggest one is the subsidy for the household. It's around $200 for each household. And then the government also approved the credit scheme for the business sector, and then payment for the 60, if I were not wrong, 60% of the private sector employment, people who work in the salary of the people who work in the private sector employment. This is just to incentivize the private sector, the companies to keep operating. The subsidy for the household is just to maintain their consumption level while protecting them, at least their consumption. Now, but from the economic point of view, these measures are not really economic recovery measures, but it's more like stabilization, economic stabilization measures, because it's not to it doesn't help the economy to recover, but it just prevent the economy to get into the worsened situation. So it's and economically, we are expecting that this spending, the government stimulus, would kind of have some multiplier effect for the rural economy, and also because some people might go to kiosks and buy agricultural vegetables from the traditional market, so the money might circulate for a few times in Timor-Leste. Now, but the problem, and I think in Timor-Leste, the current public discussion ongoing, is that the problem is not only about the COVID. Timor-Leste's economy has been in recession since 2017. due to the political impasse. In 2017, our economy declined by almost 4%. In 2018, our economy declined by almost -1%. And then in 2019, there was expectation that the economy would be recovered by growth around 4%. But and then in 2020, we have two problems here in 2020. One is that the government doesn't have the budget, which is the biggest source of the economic activity in Timor-Leste. And then we have COVID. So even before COVID, we already have the problems. Now, looking beyond that, there is a problem with the economic structure in Timor-Leste, where our economy is excessively depends on the petroleum sector, very limited economic opportunities for the youth, and then its health sector is under resources and very few people have access to clean water. Most of the employment that we have here are informal employment, and there is no protection for that. There is no coverage for the social security for the employment that we have. So when we face this situation, it's quite challenging for the government to address, even just to get the basic data for that. The solution to Timor-Leste is not only about the COVID. When I think that there is a recognition and that we need to revisit our development approach, including to revisit the development strategy, the way we allocate the limited resources that we have, and particularly the way the public investment has been allocated. The Prime Minister openly and publicly stated that this is a good opportunity for the country to revisit the development approach. And the establishment of the economic recovery team headed by Dr. Rui Gomez, from my point of view, is a good sign. One is that for the first time, at least, we have a kind of economic issue at the top of the agenda. The second is that the agenda that the Prime Minister says is quite challenging, but also it's a very important. One is how to increase the economic productivity, and then to build a resilient economy, resilient society. And that's the agenda, and how to reform the institution, the institutional reform. That this is a quite challenging given, task, but I think this is an important. The public is expecting, the way we see the public discussion is that the Commission will provide some realistic measures for the economic recovery. And also it is possible to restructure the economy because it's not only that the COVID that we have, but also the fact that the country highly depends on the petroleum, where the country doesn't have much petroleum. At least we now rely on the petroleum fund only to finance the state's budget, where it is on declining trend. So we have to find our own way. And the COVID, from my part, is that it's a good opportunity, indeed, a good opportunity for us to reflect. So this, I think, what I can say, I can contribute to this discussion, and I hope it can provide some insight from Dili, and happy to take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guteriano, for a very, very thoughtful or thought-provoking description of the economy of Timor-Leste, and also the areas that have to be looked at. And as an independent policy analyst, I have great hopes that this will help the rebuilding of the economy, along with the fact that the government has become a lot more stable now. So I'd like to thank you very much and hope that you'll have some interesting questions. Now, next I'd like to invite Brett Inder, Professor of Econometrics and Business Studies, who's especially interested in the economics of change, which ties in very much with the last speaker. And maybe you can reflect on the other speeches so far. So I'd introduce Brett Inder. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be able to join with you all, and especially nice to hear from Ines and from Gute on their perspectives on how things have been going in Timor-Leste, and also particularly to hear from Ines about the role of the embassy. When you look at the long, strong relationship between Timor-Leste and Australia, it kind of really has as its foundation the sort of everyday citizens kind of level is really where it's been able to be sustained for such a long time. Sometimes our governments haven't always got on with each other particularly well, and there's been issues that we're all well aware of. But one of the reasons why those things have actually been able to progress to relatively good outcomes is because underneath that is a pretty strong foundation of relationships at the community levels, and the friendship groups being a perfect example of that, along with the various other organisations. So the embassy having a role in facilitating strengthening those networks and putting committed people in touch with each other from both sides is very important. And I think Ines has highlighted some excellent ones there, looking into the future. And in addition to that, obviously at this time of change, the sort of relationships across countries become quite important, because we can't assume business as usual. So we've got, simple questions like, can somebody go from my country to your country? Once upon a time, that was a non-issue. We all knew exactly what to do. We booked the flight, we'd get the visa, we'd be in. But all of those things need to be kind of redefined now in the post-COVID world. So the importance of the sort of diplomatic relationships between the two countries in sort of navigating through that is much more important than ever. So and so I'm really pleased that we've got someone of Ines's experience and competence in that role. And I think you highlighted some really neat kind of opportunities and as well as a few challenges in our sort of ongoing relationship. But what certainly came through in all the things that Ines talked about was that Australia has quite a lot to contribute. And the contribution that Australia can make is not just about all of us sitting around waiting for our government to say something or do something, but it's actually about what we can do. So you talked about the With One Seed program and the carbon credits, and that's an example of an ordinary person and an ordinary group of people in Australia doing something significant, and similarly with the veteran-to-veteran relationships and so on. So if we can see that as part of the sort of long-term recovery, I think that's fantastic. At the moment, those relationships are at a distance because of travel restrictions on both sides. But fortunately, there's pretty long history there, so the relationships can be maintained even though we can't necessarily see each other face to face, except via some digital version like this. If I could just reflect a little bit on the specifics of the COVID impact, and then some of the comments that Gute made in relation to recovery, and I'll intersperse a couple of comments that Ines made as well on this. So my general observation would be, first of all, I think we're full of admiration for the way in which the people of Timor-Leste have handled the last 3 or 4 months. And I say this with experience as a person who lives in Melbourne, who's just about to go back into lockdown because we have not managed to handle the cases at all well. Despite, all the best efforts of our government. So in terms of the health response, public health response from Timor-Leste, it's been handled extremely well. And so we're all aware of the fact that cases quite quickly fell to 0. And the cases that were encountered were dealt with in a very appropriate way, and the quarantine facilities, the border areas, everything was managed remarkably well from a health point of view. And likewise, the economic stimulus that Gute described there, the payments to households, the support to business, and the various other initiatives, generally speaking, have had quite a good impact. They've been well designed and well thought through. The slight challenge that Timor-Leste has compared to Australia is that you don't have quite as deep a pockets as Australia. So the Australian government has been pouring lots and lots and lots of money at aspects of the emergency response. And Timor-Leste obviously has to be a little bit more cautious about that, simply because of limited resources. But to target households, to target businesses, and then to target food security was probably three kind of key areas, and really, honestly, a big tick to all. And I was saying to a few of my Timorese friends, in fact, I think Gute was in part of this conversation just a couple of weeks ago, just a general comment of how well Timor-Leste has handled the last 3 months. And the only conclusion I can come to is that you seem to be better off without us foreigners hanging around. Now, hopefully that's not true forever, but maybe it's been an opportunity for some of the really competent people in government and in society to actually rise to the occasion and do some excellent work in both the emergency response, but also in starting to design the recovery. So I'm really only full of praise for all of that so far. Now, Gute made a very, very good point there about the reality of the COVID sort of interruption is that it really is just literally an interruption to a period of Timor-Leste's history, which has been in decline for some years. So we've had the decline in GDP, the recession for some years, largely because of the political situation. And really that is those set of circumstances are the primary reason why a bit of a shift in direction is needed. So the changing global environment that COVID-19 produces kind of just adds momentum to those things. So you could almost sit down at the end of 2019 and say, what needs to happen for economic development in Timor-Leste? You'd come up with a strategy, which is pretty much the strategy that most people in Dili are talking about now in response to COVID-19. So COVID-19 has simply added more reasons for why we need to take these new steps in these new directions. So it is quite a significant shift. A shift, as I say, that's probably been needed for a while, but the political changes that have happened in the last few months have potentially made it more palatable, and the COVID-19 situation has made it more imperative. So in simple terms, for example, when your economy's essentially doing okay, you can essentially make most of your investments in long-term investments. So things that don't really return much benefit to the people for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, because you've got time. And so you could argue that a lot of the front-loading spending of the last 10 years has been sort of with that mindset that we build an electricity network, we establish nice big highways, we negotiate new outcomes in the Timor Sea, we try and think about developing onshore oil and gas processing facilities. All those things have been on the development agenda. We look at the development in Oikusi. All of those things were large-scale developments, which nobody really expected them to deliver any significant improvements in the short term. The improvements in those were going to be 5, 10, 20 years if they were to succeed. Well, now COVID-19 says we can't wait that long. The kinds of responses you need to make are more short-term responses. Now that's kind of convenient, because a lot of people have been feeling that perhaps that emphasis on the large-scale infrastructure investments that I just described hasn't necessarily been the best approach, and that there's been a need to repivot for a lot of reasons and to reorient the development. So as Gute has outlined very briefly, the economic recovery that's being talked about through the Commission, the Economic Recovery Team, Rui Gomez leading that team, has as its key word the word investments. And it's about, if I could sort of, this is my words, not their words to describe themselves. They're saying, like, what are the investments that we need to make as government that will lead to the best impact in terms of creating employment for our young people and improving livelihoods of the citizens and of giving us a sustainable economy in the future that is not dependent on oil and gas and the petroleum fund. Because the reality, as Guteriano summarised, is that we won't be able to rely on oil and gas and the petroleum fund forever. And so those are fantastic question, a very important agenda that's going to come out of that. So tourism's got a few mentions in that, and tourism's clearly going to be one of the things, and absolutely a role for Australia in that. The Asia Foundation does little surveys of tourists when they come and go out of Dili, and some of you have probably done the survey. And so their annual reports tell us a little bit about the reality of tourism. There's about 10,000 tourists a year that come into Timor. So this is pre-2020, of course. In 2020, there'll be virtually none. And so that's a pretty small tourist economy. It's down the bottom 3 or 4 countries in the world in terms of the volume of tourists that come in. So we're starting from a low base. About a third of those tourists come from Australia. So I'm talking about genuine tourists here, not about people like me who turn up to Dili to do work and who tick the wrong box on the visa form. We're talking about actual people who come for the tourist experience. So Australia, Europe, and New Zealand are actually the primary source countries for tourism as it's been so far, and likely to be the case in the future, because they're the kind of countries that sort of that are attracted to adventure tourism and dive tourism and the kind of things that Ines described, veteran to veteran, historical tourism. Those sort of things probably suit the sort of Western type of tourist, adventure tourist, rather than the Asian origin tourists, as a broad generalization. So in the future, Australia is going to be a critical country in relation to tourism. And so the work that's being done now to build the relationships and to promote particular kind of tourism opportunities is fantastic work. But I do want to remind us, though, that tourism alone isn't going to get us there. Even on the most optimistic forecasts, the Timor-Leste government is aiming for 300,000 tourists by the year 2030. At the moment, remember, there's 10,000. So that's a massive increase. And that 300,000 tourists will generate 15,000 new jobs. 15,000 jobs is fantastic, but we've got 200,000 people working in subsistence agriculture at the moment. And many of those, we've got the bubble of the youth bulge, as they describe it, of young people wanting to move into employment. And there's going to be literally 100+ thousand of those over the next few years, not 15,000. So we need more than that. Now, I haven't got time to go into all the ins and outs, but manufacturing, other sort of industries are going to add some possibilities, but of course, agriculture becomes the critical one. So I suspect you'll find that the economic recovery team will place quite an emphasis as well on agriculture, and the Australian government and some of the other programs that are sort of Australian companies are part of are offering some fantastic opportunities for that. So not just Australia, plenty of other countries. So Ines described the community forestry work and the possibility of replicating that. We've got really good work happening through World Fish in aquaculture, helping people to grow fish on their own land through ponds and increase nutrition outcomes as well as improve incomes. We've got rice production on the up, and one day we are going to be able to import in Australia this boutique Timorese red and black rice, and it's going to be kind of sold to us as an organic rice with all these health benefits and so on. So there's going to be not just rice, but turmeric and other spices, kind of boutique foods that are going to be exported from Timor to countries like Australia to satisfy our fussy, kind of developed country tastes for food. So agriculture's got a lot of potential. There's maize production as well, which can feed the livestock industry. Chicken can be grown in Timor-Leste much cheaper than they can be imported from Brazil with just a little bit of investment. And so one day in Dili, you'll be buying decent 2 kilogram Timorese chickens, not those scrawny Brazilian origins chickens at about the same cheaper price per kilo. So all of those things are agricultural opportunities that are on the way up, but it's going to take significant amount of investment and kind of a real mindset from government to think of these as the critical futures of the country. And you can see without too much thinking that all of those things I described there open up huge employment opportunities in a number of sectors. And the focus there is not on just doing more of the same, but in various aspects, sort of modernizing the agricultural sector so that incomes can be increased, productivity grows, income grows, and we end up with a greater level of income and economic activity, both in the rural areas as well as spilling over into the urban areas. So that's kind of my picture of what I'm hearing and quite excited about. So I think we need to watch the space for what the economic recovery team comes up with and figure out as Australians and through the embassy and through our direct relationships that we have, how we can support that agenda as it goes forward, because I'm very excited by it. Thanks very much for the chance to share a few thoughts and reflections.
Thank you very much, Brett, for those thoughtful reflections, and hopefully a lot of the issues that all three of the speakers have brought up that are very important for the well-being of Timor-Leste, and hopefully the budget will reflect those important issues such as fisheries and farming and tourism, because it depends on the sort of assistance those areas can get, the quality of the assistance for these areas to grow. So thank you very much, Brett, and I'll hand over now to Anne Wigglesworth. Just before I do, I'd like to say it's nice to see Helen Hill from Timor, occasionally in Australia, to see that she's at this very important conference. So, Anne.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Okay, well, we've got quite a number of questions have come in, so thank you all for giving your questions. And I'll start off with those directly responding to the talks. So to start off with, I'd like to present a question to Your Excellency, Ines, from Janet Hunt in Canberra. And she says, thank you so much for the talk. And asks, have you approached the Australian government to be part of the early travel bubble post-COVID, such as has been discussed with the Pacific Islands?
Thank you, Janet. No, not yet, but I'm hoping to do so tomorrow when I meet with members of the Australian DFAT.
Good. Okay, good. Now, I have a question here from Daryl Slater, and it's, I think, for Guteriano. Do you think that the Timor-Leste government may revisit the Tasmania development to balance economic development and reduce the risks of one giant project?
That's a very tough question. I think even it's a political question. So at this point, the government has not made any specific reference to the Tasmania project. And we will see in the budget, I think, in the when it comes to budget. As we are speaking, just a few minutes ago, the news just came out that they already replaced the president of the Timor-Leste. So there is a new president for the Timor-Leste. So we don't know. I mean, from the political point of view, if you see the current coalition, especially Fretlin. Fretlin has been against, not really against, but it's kind of very careful about Tasmania project before that. And I mean, Taur Matanwak also was not really, how would I say, excited about Tasmania project. So the current coalition are the two parties that are not really for the Tasmania. But we don't know things. I mean, in Timor politics, I mean, it's hard to predict until we see how the budget is going to restructure. We can see that.
Okay, I've now got a question from Judy Atwood, and she asks, will the percentage of the budget for education increase under the upcoming budget to somewhere like the recommended 15%?
For this year, I don't think so. because the budget, the budget threshold that already said is around almost 1.5. And but they including the money that already spent, which most of them goes to the COVID, the public health. So I don't think that this year there will be significant increase. There might be some increase in 2021, and we hope so. But I don't see it to reach the level of 15% of the GDP or 15% of the state's budget. There might be some increase, but I don't think that it will reach 15% of the budget.
I have another question here for Your Excellency. Hooray to Brett for raising improved agriculture. Do you think that that will be part of the new post-COVID program, is helping local farmers build up their expertise and resources?
Well, this is up to really the Commission to see whether the farmers really need to build up their local expertise. But one thing that I've noticed, apart from this, I think what it can be used is those Timorese, young Timorese that come here for in the seasonal workers program, that can be useful for them to learn, to get the skills, because they come here, they learn a lot of skills anyway. One of them is time management, and even to how to, the fruit picking and vegetables. I think maybe the Ministry of Agriculture should also look into the programs for that. When they get back there, they should be taken back to their own local communities to help the farmers. And I think one of them is also for the farmers to learn the business skills. And this is something that I think the seasonal workers can also take it back. Once they're here, they can also participate in some programs and then take it back to East Timor, and then and go with the farmers and then teach them how to do business and so forth. I think this is one of the opportunities that I may be wrong, they probably are doing it, but as far as I'm aware, back when I was in Timor, I didn't come across any of these things, so.
So this one is from Avelino Maria de Jesus Masal. And in relation to the recent economic recovery plan from the government, what are the government strategies, and what are the, to prevent the private sectors from bankruptcy during the state of emergency, and particularly for those that are on the brink of bankruptcy, such as businesses operating in the construction sector?
I mean, I'll give the answer, but perhaps Her Excellency Ambassador Mana Ines or Brett might add. But there are three kind of mechanism that the government use to protect the private sector. I mean, by private sector, I mean the companies that are operating in Timor-Leste, and they are registered. One is the payment for 60% of the labor. I mean, they worker salary of the worker. Another one is the credit scheme, and the moratorium for the credit, because some of the private sector that has been taken credit before from the bank. For now, because they don't have any activities, the government in previous policies to put the moratorium on their credit, so they don't need to pay the credit, their credit in the bank for during the state of emergency. This I think the policies that introduced previously. For the next level, we don't know yet because we still wait for the report and the recommendation from the Commission Economic Recovery team.
Okay, thank you. Another one for Ambassador Ines from Pat Walsh. Will lobbying the Australian businesses to invest in Timor form part of her brief?
Yes, definitely. But there are challenges as well. I have been to Perth and I met quite a few business people that would like to invest. For example, one of them is the mining company. So the thing is, a lot has to go back to East Timor in terms of, you know, mining law, and there are some hurdles with the bureaucracy. So as an ambassador, sometimes it's very difficult. Like, we have this role of getting investors to East Timor. But then on the other hand, people are ready and then East Timor is not ready. So maybe these are the things that also the Commission can look into it. If I may ask you to pass on, because these are the things that the business people relay to the embassy a lot of times. So one of the hurdles. Of course, the political situation over the last few years has not been really conducive to any business investments. However, now that we have settled, but now we've got COVID, so that's another difficult thing for us as well, and it's a huge challenge for us. But nevertheless, yes, this is one of the priorities as well for the embassy to look into business investment in East Timor.
Good. And I have another question for you also about facilitating growth into the future through digital technology. Do you think, what are your thoughts on digital technology as a mechanism for facilitating growth, economic growth into the future?
There's high potential there. That's why I mentioned about connectivity as well. And I think the Australian government is ready for the, what do you call? Submarine cable.
Submarine cable, yeah.
Submarine cable. So again, we're still waiting for things in Dili. And it's also because I think they were ready, but it's just due to COVID-19. So things have stopped there. But nevertheless, yes, we do need it. I mean, if you want to talk about, you know, tourism and so forth, and you do lots of things through the internet and marketing, whatever you mention. I mean, like, there's ample opportunities there to use the internet, and connectivity is one of the major things that we lack in Timor.
Could I just add to that, Anne, in relation to digital potential? It's one of the hardest things to do is to imagine the possibilities when you haven't experienced it for yourself.
Yeah.
So when, but there are tastes of that I think are catching on. So there was an organisation called Catalpa, which had a program of helping early primary school teachers with reminding them of the curriculum and preparing them with lesson plans using their mobile phone technology. So if all of the material was delivered through their mobile phones, and they had daily reminders about this is what you should be teaching your children today, and a whole package of things. The beauty of this program was that the teachers loved it, including old teachers who perhaps you might have been a bit worried about the adaptation to technology. It worked really well in terms of effectiveness in the classroom. And it was so much a cheaper way to deliver training to teachers than to drag them all into Dili for some in-service teaching training. So the possibilities of sort of leapfrogging kind of some of the old ways of doing things and doing it much, much more effectively, whether it's, you know, training teachers right through to delivering health or running businesses are endless. As we kind of know, as people who live and see digital technology every day, just trying to get the eyes of the Timorese open to the possibilities is the challenge. And the best way to do that is with great examples like what's happened there with Catalpa, and, you know, there's various other ones like that. So I think the possibilities are great.
I do have a couple of people have sort of asked me to say something, an announcement, which I think I'll just do now. There's a couple more questions as well. So from Jim Truscott, he's saying in terms of tourism, with a historical component, the battlefield trekking guide to Timor-Leste covers 1,000 battles from World War II and the independence war and UN operations, this won't happen until travel is allowed in 2021. So he's saying that the draft in English language remains freely available to anyone who wishes to use it. Please contact Jim on outlook.com if anyone is interested. And also I have another from Helen Hill. Helen is asking if any of the participants have skills that they could help in the ringing of the secondary curriculum. She can see people in the audience who would be in the category and would like to be in contact with them over Zoom, even if they're not able to come to Timor. So please, if you think you can help with the curriculum, contact Helen Hill. Okay, there's a couple more questions. Another one that came from Judy Atwood was that was in relation to the money that the workers getting. Are the workers who are receiving a subsidy at the moment from the government, who are working in private homes, who are mostly women, are they also receiving that subsidy?
It's not. The answer is no, because the subsidy that we have, especially for the household, the reason for to have a universal subsidy for the household, cash transfer for the household, is that we have quite significant informal economy that are not registered in that are not covered by the Social Security. So those people who work in the household, like the one that Jude asked, was protected through this because they are not registered in the Social Security scheme that exists, that the government has. Now, in the last few months, I mean, the last 1 or 2 months, the people from the microlet, like informal sector, also have been demanding for them to be included in the Social Security, but they didn't pay the Social Security before. They didn't contribute it before. So, and we didn't have the data. I mean, someone who helped the government as a technical assistant, it becomes a very complicated, because we didn't have the data, for example, how many people work in the microlet, or I mean, minibus or truck, driver, those are things. So with this, the government is trying to pay them using that scheme, but also it's a good opportunity from the government point of view is to using that scheme to formalize them. So in the future, I mean, they might get the subsidy for now if they register, but they will pay back after the COVID. So it's a good mechanism of to formalize also them and also to include them in the Social Security scheme. But I mean, working in the government, I mean, seeing all this, I mean, one of the problems that I'm facing is lack of the data, actual data, and it's a quite a challenging. It's yeah.
I could just add, Oxfam is doing, in Timor-Leste, is doing some work on informal sector workers in particular. So that point that Gute made about making them more visible in the economy in the future. Again, this is one of those positives that's come out of COVID. That issue has come to the surface now where it's not really been addressed much in the past. And again, the Oxfam work of just advocating on behalf of them is very helpful.
Oh, good. Okay. No,
Can I just say something? I just hope that the domestic worker sector will also have some kind of formalisation so that they're included in future, because I mean that's a heavily female sector and it looks like they're missing out. And households, there will be some households where there is the 60% subsidy also getting that householder support that was mentioned. I just think women miss out. I know they miss out in Australia too, but Timorese women really need it. Thank you.
One other comment here, which I think is a very pertinent one, which is saying that we're looking at the question of tourism, and I wonder if Ines might like to comment on this and whether it's something the government might think about. That when people are booking to go to Timor, a lot of the friendship groups and you know, when tourism starts again, generally people use the booking.com and Expedia type systems. And by doing that, 15% of the payment actually goes to America and doesn't go to the hotel. And saying that if people book directly with companies in Timor, that they would get more of the income from tourism if they can promote themselves appropriately. Is that a feasible suggestion? Can anyone comment on that?
My hunch would be that people will always gravitate to the booking.com type services because we're Westerners, we're used to those kind of services. But if Timor-Leste tourism can develop a bit of a strategy, can include a good web portal and the link from the web portal to a whole bunch of hotel websites where you can do some online booking, then yes, a lot of the booking.com type bookings could be bypassed. So that's kind of pretty central to developing a tourism strategy, is that sort of online presence that people in the West can access easily and can do bookings easily. So absolutely feasible. So I don't know what the numbers are, but my hunch is in Australia, you know, a hotel in Australia, a tourist resort in Australia might get a certain percentage of its bookings directly and another % with booking.com. You're never going to eliminate the booking.com type option, but if you can shift the balance, that's a great plus for the host hotel or the host facility, and it's very achievable.
Oh yes, Tony Marjoram, she's presented the question that in the Pacific Islands, there's many common similarities between Timor and the Pacific in terms of resources and problems with illegal fishing and other economic issues. Is there very much cooperation between the Pacific and Timor on these issues?
And ever since I've taken up my post, I did not get a brief from my predecessor about the cooperation of between the Pacific countries. And I haven't had a chance also to have courtesy call with the ambassadors here that are represented there. So it's extremely difficult for me to comment on this, but however, these are the things that we will look into it once we have meetings with our counterparts here at the embassy here in Canberra.
Anastasia just is encouraging people to join the educational sustainable tourism that they're running on timorunearthed.com. So just a quick message from her. I think that's all the questions. Glenda, do you have anything you want to say at this stage?
Thanks, Anne. I just want to say it's been a very enjoyable seminar, and I think it's time, and thank you to the speakers who've all presented very well. And I think it's just over to Jean to round us off and thank everybody.
And I'd also like to welcome the Honorary Consul, Peter McMullen, who's also in the audience. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you all very much for participation, and we look forward to seeing you another time.
And we're glad to see you, Helen, and others from Timor and around the place. So we wave.
Boa tarde.
I think
Tarde. Boa tarde. Bye bye.
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 Bye.